Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. With Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon, here's your host, Matt Jones.
Arkansas is 1-0. The Razorbacks beat North Dakota State 76-58 in their season opener on Monday. Not much time to rest. The Razorbacks turn around and they'll play Fordham Friday night at Bud Walton Arena. It'll be a 7 o'clock tip-off. The game will be on SEC Network Plus. Matt Jones with Scotty Bordelon and Andrew Joseph of WholeHogSports.com. Scotty, let's start with you. The North Dakota State game. Arkansas got off to a good start. North Dakota State kind of leveled it up there toward the end of the first half. And then Arkansas had a big run on either side of halftime that helped them really pull away. And they led by a lot of points in that game and didn't have much of a problem in the second half. Trevin Brazile had a nice game in his first outing as a Razorback, 21 points, 12 rebounds. Ricky Council had 22 points. And they made it look, I don't know if easy is the right word, but they won comfortably even without playing with their best player or the guy who we think is going to be their best player this year, Nick Smith, who was out with a knee injury.
Yeah, I think going into the game, I don't know if it was so much a concern, but it was definitely a question that I had about, even with Nick, who was going to be Arkansas's second and third scoring options. And then you go into your opener without Nick. So who is going to lead your offense? Who's going to be your, second option on offense? Like, it was even, for me anyway, where is the offense going to flow and who is the offense going to flow through? And at least for one game anyway, Ricky Council and Trevin Brazile, filled those roles. And Devo Davis, I thought, was really good offensively. He was aggressive going to the rim. I think I looked at one of the analytics sites that I'm a subscriber to. Over, I think it was 57% of his field goal attempts the other night were in the lane or at the rim. That's a pretty good number for him. It tells me he's not settling for jump shots, and he's kind of shown that he can be an inefficient jump shooter. I mean, he's had his moments in the mid-range area before, but those three guys were really good. You saw how dynamic both Ricky and Trevin are. Ricky, put down a dunk the other night in traffic, just on a kind of, it was like a routine drive to the rim, and then he throws down a reverse dunk. Like I told the HS Sports Club on Wednesday, it's like, if you think that's normal, I can guarantee you it's not. Like, I don't know that Arkansas's had an athlete as explosive as Ricky come through here in a long time, just in terms of just explosiveness going to the rim and maybe as acrobatic finishing at the rim as he is. And then Trevin's length is just otherworldly, and then he's explosive too. So when you combine, like the 7+ wingspan with his long arms, the fact he's already 6'10", and I thought he attacked rebounds really well the other night, and Arkansas fans are going to ooh and ah, over his rebounds and, wanting to put people in the rim all season long. I think Monday was just kind of a precursor for a lot of things to come for those guys.
Yeah, you mentioned not knowing who would be kind of that 2 and 3 scoring option behind Nick Smith Jr. And I think it was interesting in the post game to hear Trevin Brazile's comments about how at Missouri he was more of a role player, but the Arkansas coaching staff wants him to shoulder a more offensive load than he did in the past. And I think that their expectation is he's going to be that go-to guy if Nick Smith can't go. And I do think he has the talent level, as he showed with the 21 points and 12 rebounds, which I think his rebounding is also going to be crucial to this team's success. Ricky Council with the 22 points, like we mentioned, I think that is probably a watermark for him. I don't expect him to score at that clip on an average, like a nightly basis. But I think, his athleticism is otherworldly, like Scotty mentioned. And if he can finish near the rim like he was doing against North Dakota State, that he's going to be really hard to stop just because he's so hard to stay in front of.
I would agree with the point of Ricky and his offense. I think it was just a kind of a product of the game that the game plan Arkansas had. Obviously, was attack the rim. They were far superior athletically than North Dakota State, and they took full advantage of it. That's what you expect from Arkansas there. And I think Ricky did a great job of, just taking advantage of matchups. If I could add something else about Trevin, he did a pretty good job, I thought, of showing North Dakota State's defense that he could be a 3-level scorer. Like he attacked the rim pretty well. I don't think he probably finished at the rim as well as he wanted to, but he definitely attacked it at times. And then he was the bulk of Arkansas's perimeter shooting. And so you got 2 of the 3 levels covered there. And he didn't make the shots, but I really liked his mid-range jumpers around the elbows. And those are really, really clean looks. And defenders have to kind of give him some space, because at that point, if he's got the ball, like he could take one dribble, maybe spin move, floater, or lay up off the glass. But they've got to respect that part of his game too. The area of the game where he can put the ball on the floor. And so I think he's going to have some opportunities to knock down some mid-range jumpers. He's got really good touch. The misses he had in the mid-range were soft misses. So it was like front of the rim and just, didn't fall in. But I think that's an area of his game that he'll unlock pretty soon. And then if he gets that, he's going to be, a real challenge to cover.
We'll see how good North Dakota State is. They were 23-10 last year. They're in their 9th year under their head coach. So there's some familiarity there. It felt like they had some older players on that roster. As we record this, the game hasn't been played, but some of you might listen to this after the game is played. North Dakota State plays Thursday night in Lawrence against KU. That'll be a real good, kind of early gauge of how good I think North Dakota State is. How they perform against Kansas at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. One of the big stories, if not the big story this week for Arkansas, of course, is Nick Smith out. They said that he was held out of Monday's game for precautionary reasons. They called it knee management. The sound of it is that he's probably not going to play Friday night against Fordham. Scotty, how concerning do you think this is? What's going on with Nick Smith right now?
I just think it's a challenging situation all the way around, right? So on Eric and Arkansas side, they worked really hard in recruiting him and getting him to trust them and sign. And now I think the coaching staff and everybody in the program wants to prove to people nationally that the program can not only get kids like Nick, but beat people with players of his caliber, if that makes sense. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So on the other hand, if we're being honest, like Nick is not most kids, and that knee is not like most knees that have come through here. And so if things work out for him, he's going to be a pro really soon. Nobody wants a long-term injury to derail that, so they're being cautious in managing that situation. They obviously want to take care of him because he's their guy, and I think they have to do things the right way too, to make sure that some other high-profile guys they recruit now and down the line will feel comfortable not only coming here and knowing they'll be taken care of in general, but if an injury was to happen to them, that they'll be good and taken care of and managed the right way. I just assume it's kind of a deal where there are plenty of voices in this whole thing. Like, Arkansas staff wants Nick to play, but they also, want him to take care of himself. Nick, obviously, I think wants to play. I mean, he's too much of a competitor to not. But I think everybody's got to keep his future in mind, and I think that may be where some of the frustrations coming in with Eric. And something else that might add to it is the guys that are actually playing right now are working and trying to develop a chemistry to win games now. And when the time comes for Nick to come back, there's going to be a little bit of a reset that happens because you're adding a big part of your team back into the mix, who really changes kind of the complexion of who you are, especially on the offensive end and from an on-court leadership perspective. So it's a layered situation, I think. Personally, I think we'll see him in Maui and maybe even next Wednesday here and there against South Dakota State. I just think that Maui trip is just too grand of a stage for Nick to maybe not play in. Maybe that's rushing him back, and maybe I'm completely off on that. I just think that his competitive nature is such that he's going to want to come back and play and try to get this team, up to the standard that Eric wants them to play at, maybe sooner than in years past. But yeah, I'm kind of curious for y'all's thoughts on it too. But I just think it's a complicated situation. I think that's when you watch Eric's press conferences and he's asked about Nick, he just kind of goes to the point that we've got to get our healthy available bodies ready to go. So I think there's a little bit of irritation there, but it's not just one thing in particular. It's a pretty layered deal.
I come at this from a baseball standpoint because I cover baseball so much. You see these, really high profile baseball prospects after they get to college, and sometimes they're sophomore draft eligible, but more often it's their junior year when you see this. And if there's ever an injury, the people that they have kind of around them, they don't want that injury talked about openly. Whether it's an advisor, it's going to become their agent, or someone who's going to kind of hook them up with an agent, might be parents, whoever is in kind of their circle, they don't want it talked about. And I kind of wonder if that might be what's going on with Nick Smith here, and that Musselman, is kind of, I don't know if handcuffed is the word, but he's at a point where he's really not at liberty just to disclose a whole lot of information about what this injury is.
Yeah, I think we're kind of seeing that in football as well, with KJ Jefferson injured, that Sam Pittman's not going to give the opposing team an inch and kind of give you an update on his status. He's going to leave it very vague, as Eric Musselman's done, saying he's going to leave it up to Nick Smith and leave it up to the trainers on when he'll be back. And I just think that's kind of a gamesmanship that you're going to get when you're dealing with star players like Nick Smith Jr. And I think everybody wants Nick to play. I think he wants to play. His teammates want him to play. And I think the fans obviously want to see what he can bring to the table. But I think it's good for everyone else on the team that they were able to handle North Dakota State so easily without him. And I think it speaks volumes to where the program is at under Eric Musselman, that you have, what was he, like a top 3 recruit in the nation? And as you said, the North Dakota State game was not a dogfight. They made it look easy without him. And so I think that just kind of eases the minds of fans that they're not so reliant on the star player. But when they get him back, like, that's a huge bonus to have to an already good team.
I think that Arkansas and both Nick's circle are trying to be smart about the way that the information about his injury is being disseminated, because Nick, like I mentioned earlier, really high profile guy. Like, if you look at the mock drafts and the evaluations of some of the best basketball minds in terms of analysts, and then like actual decision makers, and also the people who do mock drafts and things like that, he's a top 5 pick by on most accounts, right? And so I think they want to be careful about specific information about the injury getting out, because they don't want potentially down the line, like say in the spring or the time leading up to the draft, they don't want there to be maybe a cloud of uncertainty just about his health, maybe that could diminish maybe his draft stock a little bit. Because I mean, you see it all the time. I feel like in right around draft time, somebody will say that they really like a guy, but he's got this knee deal, or but he's had foot injuries in the past, or like in football, like he's had like Tua Tagovailoa, for example, like hip injury in college. And Bryce Young might get knocked a little bit for the shoulder injury that he had this year. So I think they're going to be really careful about what they let get out. And there's probably, if you're looking for clarity or many specifics on the injury, probably not going to get it, just unless there's some kind of a behind the scenes agreement between, Arkansas and Nick Circle and his people, about it getting out there. But I would not expect, a whole lot of specifics to come out about that, just for the reasons I listed.
And if you're wondering why that is, looking at the NBA draft salaries out of the players who were drafted earlier this year, for the 5th overall pick in the NBA draft, a signing bonus of about 7.2 million. You get down to number 10, 4.8 million. It's a really big deal. And these are the types of situations, or, obviously these types of situations can really impact how teams feel about a player. So you certainly understand why there's such sensitivity about it. Smith is not the only player who's injured leading up to the Fordham game. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Trevin Brazil, Anthony Black. They both had ankle injuries after the game the other night against North Dakota State. And Ricky Council has got a little bit of an elbow injury, Scotty.
Yeah, I knew that Ricky went down for a minute against North Dakota State, but I wasn't exactly sure what was going on. I didn't know if he was cramping, but the way that he was like laying belly down on the floor, I didn't feel like it was a calf cramp or anything. If it was a a Charlie horse or something, or a hamstring cramp, like that would have been pretty noticeable. And Eric said on Wednesday that it was an elbow, so I guess he must have landed awkwardly or just had it hit inadvertently. Um, so that's something to keep an eye on. I think Anthony Black, his ankle, kind of a freak deal. Trevin Brazil's ankle roll was really unfortunate because he's going up, boxing out on a free throw attempt for North Dakota State, and he's going up to get his 10th rebound, get that double under his belt, and he just, like, no one really around him, and he just rolled his ankle. That's just the freakish nature of those injuries was just kind of stunning to me more than anything else. And I know somebody on our Facebook account said that Eric Musselman on Wednesday sounded like Sam Pittman talking about how banged up his team was, but some of the frustration with Eric in terms of the injuries is just probably the freakish nature of them. Like, you can't really control them. And it's not, I know basketball plays, 30 plus games a year, but I don't know, it's, in football, you kind of understand guys being banged up just because that's the nature of the beast, playing, the most physical sport in the world. But basketball, it can be a little bit more unlucky at times, and freakish things like that can happen. If there's a guy that I'm maybe a little bit concerned with not playing on Friday, and we don't have any official word on this, it's just kind of my gut, it would be Trevin, just because of his frame. Not the stockiest built guy, a little bit thin and slender in his frame, and you just kind of wonder how that ankle is reacting, a few days after rolling it. But I think Anthony Black came back in on Monday after he rolled his ankle, so I think he's going to be okay. They tried to take it pretty light with some of those guys and get them as much rest and treatment as possible. So we'll see. But I think if I had to bet, I would guess that at least AB and Ricky go on Friday.
The Basketball Podcast of Mid-America is brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit their showroom at 411 South Metro Parkway in Rogers, or online at landerstoyotanwa.com.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Arkansas plays Fordham Friday night at Bud Walton Arena, 7 o'clock tip-off. It's going to be cold in Fayetteville, so being inside will be a good place to be. The Rams went 16-16 last year. They're in their first year under a new head coach. Scotty, tell us more about Fordham.
Yeah, so it seems like the scout from Eric on Wednesday is they've got a pretty talented guard, Darius Quisenberry. He's 6'2" senior guard, so he's been around the block a time or two. He was a pretty good player for Fordham last season. I think he was 6th in the Atlantic 10 in scoring, and that was his first year after starting his career and transferring from Youngstown State. At Youngstown State, he was a 2-time All-Horizon League player, so pretty talented kid. And he looks, at least on paper, I was looking at KenPom earlier at the box score from their opener. They beat Dartmouth by 14 the other night. He took almost 33% of that team's shots when he was on the floor, and he played a pretty good chunk of their minutes. So he's the guy that Eric has designated their star player. And I just posted 5 things to watch for the game on Friday night. type of column on the website, and one of them is just how Arkansas defends Fordham's star player, and it's Quisenberry. And Eric, I think about 30 seconds into his first answer, just kind of summing up the game the other night in his press conference, he was pretty disappointed with the way Arkansas handled Grant Nelson, who he thought was North Dakota State's best player. So he's trying to, I think, right now, pound it into the guys that, we've had a lot of success here in the last 2 or 3 years because we've been so good at if not shutting down, at least limiting opposing teams' best players and their best perimeter weapons and inside guys and all that. So I think the attention to detail needs to be there. And he said Fordham's got 5 guys that they classify as red light shooters, which means, Arkansas's got to pay, really close attention to those guys anytime they have the ball on the perimeter or maybe running off the screens, whether it's curls and flares and that kind of thing. So just this team's just got to pay attention to the little details. And if they do, I think they might be able to cruise on Friday like they did Monday.
Yeah, I think Arkansas has put a lot of time and effort into scheduling their non-conference games in a way that are going to be productive for them in the long run. And I don't think maybe the opponents don't look great on paper, but then somehow half of them end up making the NCAA tournament. And so, I mean, they know what they're doing when they're scheduling these opponents. And I think we talked earlier about when Arkansas would really have its first true test of the season. And I think someone maybe said it would be Louisville and they're in Maui, but then they just had that big loss to Bellarmine. I don't even know if I said that right. So that's should tell you how bad of a loss that is. But I think that Arkansas's first maybe true test of the season might not come until that second game in Maui if it's Texas Tech or Creighton.
Yeah, that Louisville loss, not their first high-profile loss this year. They also lost to a Division II team during the preseason. That game seems a lot more winnable right now when Arkansas gets out onto the island against Hawaii. Hey, speaking of the Maui Invitational, of course, that's the big high-profile non-conference event this year for Arkansas. Scotty, this morning you wrote that they're going to go to San Diego in November of 2024 in kind of their next big non-conference event after the battle for Atlantis next year.
You think Eric Musselman's excited about going to San Diego?
I think he might be.
I think he is too, and that not really surprising to me. And like just some of the specifics, it's a 4-team, 2-game, multi-team event in San Diego. I think it's at the Jenny Craig Pavilion in San Diego. Arkansas is going to play a couple of games. I think it's on their first game will be on Thanksgiving Day in 2024, and then their second will be the day after Thanksgiving, and then they'll wrap it up and come back home. But it just that game or that their involvement in that multi-team event just kind of continues, what looks like a recent trend, especially with Eric, that he wants his teams to play, and he's going to schedule some pretty high quality early season tournaments for his team to get them tested for the back half of the schedule, where that part of your season can make or break your season. But in the early season, it's just all about getting prepared. And we don't know who's going to be in that field yet, but I think there's some pretty good teams in the inaugural tournament next year. I think USC, Seton Hall, Iowa, and I think there's another one I'm forgetting, but
Southern Cal.
Southern Cal are going to be some pretty good teams in Arkansas's field, I would imagine.
Yeah, the games in Kansas City last year, the games in Maui this year, those were actually scheduled by Mike Anderson and his staff, and then Musselman kind of inherited, those contracts, and certainly, nobody's going to want to get going to Maui. That's the kind of the premier tournament, I think. Battle for Atlantis, it might be the number 2 tournament at this point, and they go there next year in a field that looks really good, includes North Carolina and some other basketball top programs.
Yeah, the 2023 Battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas, Arkansas is going to play 3 games there. And we found out, I think it was back in May or June, that the field there is going to have North Carolina, Villanova, Michigan, Memphis, Oklahoma, Stanford, and Northern Iowa. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter which 3 teams that Arkansas plays there. They're going to get tested. And it's going to be a chance for Arkansas to get an early resume win.
Now, I think Oklahoma has backed out of the battle for Atlantis. I think Texas Tech is going to go down there now, which is kind of weird because it seems like Arkansas and Texas Tech can't get away from each other. They could potentially play the second game in Maui. Obviously, they played in the tournament a couple of years ago. There was a chance they could have played in the tournament last year. It just seems like those two teams are kind of, I don't know, like shadowing each other right now. Maybe they're going to San Diego too.
Yeah, I just think I kind of think they're similarly built programs. Even with Texas Tech's coaching change, like they've got Mark Adams there now, but Texas Tech was a team that made a pretty nice run in the NCAA tournament last year. I remember when, after Arkansas beat Gonzaga in the Sweet 16, Duke and Texas Tech was the game that was being played in the Chase Center right after it. So that program's on the up and up, kind of like the same way that Arkansas is. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Arkansas and Texas Tech play in the future in some Big 12 SEC Challenge type games. I think Arkansas went down there. Was it Mike Anderson's last year or next to last year? It was a really, really fun game. The atmosphere in Lubbock is unreal.
Mhm.
And Eric talked about before the Texas game, I asked him about his history with Chris Beard, and Eric took a Nevada team, I think it was in 2016-17 season. So 2016, late in that year, in 2016, took a team down there. I think Nevada was ranked in the top 25 for the first time in like a decade, and they lost to Texas Tech in overtime. And Eric said that the student section down there was rocking. It was one of the best regular season game atmospheres that he's ever been a part of. And I think it's good for the game. Like if you can get two programs that are built like they are on toughness, defense, physicality, discipline, all that. And it always helps to have some really high caliber talented players too, that are probably going to be, that might make up, part of the future of the NBA too. So I would definitely not be opposed to that.
Yeah, and speaking of Texas Tech and Arkansas kind of copying each other, I think something that Arkansas should take after Texas Tech is that student section. I saw a video on Twitter the other day from, who was it, Jeff Haxton, and he posted this video of the student section in Tech, and it just looks insane. Like they've got a section obviously behind the basket, which I think is a better placement for a student section anyway, but then they've also got like levels, like just rows and rows of students instead of just the one setup along the court that Arkansas has.
The Texas Tech atmosphere last year when Chris Beard came back in his first year with Texas was absolutely electric. And I remember Texas Tech that night had some guys, I guess in their video staff, that had like some really, really high res cameras just right behind one of the players in the pregame right before the game tipped off. And if there's ever like a game that could have an opponent feel like he's like the Mr. Krabs meme, where it seems like everything around him is dizzy and just spinning and blurry, it would probably be that atmosphere. I think Arkansas and Texas Tech could both, fill up their arenas if a game were to happen.
I'd call it downright frightening for Texas whenever they went
sure.
back to Lubbock last year with Chris Beard. By the way, I wrote this in the magazine this week at our basketball preview at Hogs Illustrated. New student seating is coming to Bud Walton Arena. That's part of the renovation plans. We don't know when the renovation is going to happen to Bud Walton. It's going to be a real large-scale renovation, but we know that is in the works. And as part of that renovation, you're going to see the student seating moved around inside the arena. I know that's something that is definitely on their radar. By the way, Arkansas played Texas Tech and Mike Anderson's last year in Lubbock. They also played Texas Tech here in Fayetteville as part of the SEC Big 12 Challenge 4 years before that. So these two teams have seen each other quite a bit over the years, and it's always a great series. All time, Arkansas and Texas Tech have played 80 times, and both of those teams have won 40. Again, Arkansas and Fordham on Friday night, SEC Network Plus, 7 o'clock tip-off. Hope you'll come to wholehogsports.com before, during, after the game for our basketball coverage. Of course, it's a big SEC football weekend here in Fayetteville as well. With LSU being in town, we'll have our Whole Hog Football podcast preview of that game on Friday on this same podcast channel, and plenty of Arkansas LSU coverage at our site as well. For Andrew Joseph and Scotty Bordelon, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.